Today we're going to talk about disruption. We'll dig into that feeling that the world is just changing way too fast, and what happens when our whole sense of normal gets turned completely upside down.
You know that feeling, right? It's kind of like you're on a treadmill and someone just keeps cranking up the speed. You're doing your best to keep pace, but the ground under your feet just won't stay still. So, where does that feeling of being so disoriented actually come from?
Well, to really get a handle on it, we're going to start small, with something we all know, and then we'll zoom out and out again to see the really big picture at play. Okay, let's get into it.
So our whole journey starts with this invisible but super powerful force that pretty much anchors our entire reality.
Just think about it for a second. Your morning coffee, the route you take to work, how you say hello to your coworkers. You know, these aren't just random actions. They're all part of a stable network of routines. And it's this network that makes the world feel predictable, safe, and, well, manageable. It's the quiet rhythm we build our lives on.
And what's so wild is that these routines, they're not just about being efficient. Nope. They are literally the pillars holding up our reality. They give us meaning, they give us a sense of direction, and a really deep-seated feeling of security. One of our sources even calls this ordinary world a reality par excellence. You know, the main stage where we can truly be ourselves. So, what happens when that stage just completely collapses from under us?
Okay, so let's look at the first level of disruption, something that is deeply, deeply personal. A sudden, serious illness.
And just like that, the world you knew is gone. An act as simple as getting out of bed, something you never even thought about, suddenly becomes this huge challenge. The world of illness is a totally different reality. It just shatters our routines and forces us to rethink everything, absolutely everything we once took for granted. The familiar becomes totally foreign.
But this personal crisis, it does something else. It reveals something much bigger. It's not just our own body that feels alien. Suddenly, the world outside can become alienating too. And this quote really says it all. Illness pulls back the curtain on how our society is often built for a very, very specific idea of what's normal.
I mean, just think about this example. A simple staircase, something most people wouldn't even notice, becomes an impossible wall. The world doesn't just present a few new challenges. In some ways, it can feel actively hostile. It's a perfect and pretty stark example of how a personal disruption can expose the built-in blind spots of the world we've all made.
Okay, so now let's zoom out. We're going from the personal to the societal. Because these exact same patterns of disruption and adaptation, they're happening all around us, on a massive scale, even in something as routine as our daily commute.
And a fantastic example of this is the massive tectonic shift that's happening right now in the auto industry, the move to electric vehicles. This isn't just about changing what kind of fuel we use. This is about disrupting a whole century's worth of routines, infrastructure, and habits.
I mean, just look at the raw speed of this change. In 2023, almost 1 out of every 5 new cars sold across the entire planet was electric. That is a 35% jump in a single year, and it's more than 6 times higher than it was just 5 years ago. This isn't slow, gradual change. This is a massive disruption happening right now. And when you look at where it's happening, you can see it's a global thing, but it's really concentrated. China is absolutely leading the pack, making up a whopping 60% of the entire market. In fact, if you take China, Europe, and the US together, you're looking at 95% of all electric car sales. So a few key players are driving this worldwide shift.
And here's that echo again. Just like with a personal disruption, this big societal one is facing some major hurdles. There's the high upfront cost, which is a real barrier for a lot of people. Then there's range anxiety, right? That fear you'll run out of power, which is tied directly to the fact that we just don't have charging stations everywhere yet. And maybe the biggest one of all, changing a century of habits built around the good old gas station.
So, we've seen disruption on the personal level with health and on the societal level with cars. But what's the engine driving all of this? Why does everything feel like it's speeding up? For that, we have to zoom out one last time to get to the theory behind it all.
There's actually a name for this. It's called social acceleration. And the idea is pretty simple, really. It's that the pace of change itself, in our technology, our culture, our social lives, is constantly getting faster. And this isn't just a feeling we have. It's a real force that is actively chipping away at our sense of a stable, predictable world.
And it kind of works like this. First, the pace of everything just speeds up. Because of that, the knowledge and the skills we've spent our lives building up, our mental toolkit, well, they can become outdated way, way faster than they used to. Which leads us to the final step. The future gets really foggy and it becomes incredibly hard to make long-term plans with any kind of real confidence.
There's this quote from one of the academic sources that just nails it. This constant acceleration attacks the very foundation of that comfortable, familiar world we talked about at the beginning. It makes the ordinary feel a lot less ordinary.
So here's the bottom line. That feeling of struggling to keep up, it's not just in your head. It is a completely rational response to a world where the basic rules and tools are changing at a faster and faster rate. We are, in a very real way, becoming strangers in our own lives.
Okay, so from our own bodies to the global economy, we keep seeing this same pattern over and over. Stability, then disruption, then adaptation. So, what's the big takeaway from all this?
It's really the same story, just on a different scale. Whether it's one person trying to figure out a world that suddenly feels hostile, or it's an entire industry being completely reinvented, the fundamental question is always the same. How do we find our footing when the ground just won't stop moving?
So let's just quickly pull all these threads together. We saw how our sense of a normal, stable world is built on routine. We saw how a personal crisis, like an illness, can just shatter that foundation. Then we saw how huge societal shifts, like the move to electric cars, are basically the same process, just on a massive scale. And finally, we identified social acceleration as this deep undercurrent that makes constant change the defining feature of modern life.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question. If the world is always going to be changing, what do we hold on to? What becomes our anchor? Maybe the anchor isn't something fixed out there, but something we build inside ourselves. Maybe it's our resilience, or the strength of our communities, or just our plain old ability to create new routines, even in the middle of a storm.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. I really hope this has given you a clearer way to think about the dizzying changes happening all around us. For more explainers that connect the dots on complex topics, please be sure to follow our channel.